This is the palette that Quabell found between Upper and Lower Egypt. And if you notice, this is a king named King Narmer. This palettes back then were known to grind up cosmetics, but eventually became a statement of art. So this palette is bigger than the average palette used to grind up cosmetics and to grind up different things in ancient Egypt. This particular palette represented something. And what it represented was the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. This is when the dynasties began. Here you can see King Narmer. He has his arm raised up with a rod in his hand. In his other arm, he has his enemies. Enemies that rose against him. Alright? Now, as you can see, he's wearing what type of crown? Upper Egypt crown. On the back of the palette, he's wearing a crown of Lower Egypt. Alright? There's a lot, you know, they say pictures is worth 1,000 words, and I believe that because there's a lot to be said in this particular palette. And I'm going to have to talk about that next week because this is a lot. But before we close, I want you to notice once again the African features. Alright? The afro, the nose, the ears. Alright? This is definitely Egyptian attire. Alright? And if you notice, the features of his enemy are a little bit different than his features. Alright? As you can see, his enemies at the bottom of his feet. Alright? There's mention in the Bible that enemies are under Jesus' feet, or you know, enemies are under my feet. Sometime in church we used to say that Satan, he's under my feet. You know what I'm saying? Well, that's where this come from, right here. That concept, yeah, it came from Egypt. It didn't come from the Bible. It came from Egypt. If you notice, a lot of artifacts had their enemies at the bottom of their feet. As a matter of fact, some of the thrones that they found, the footstool of the throne would have their enemies at the bottom of the footstool. This is where this concept comes from. Right here. The Bible got that concept. The Bible got that concept from. Alright? Before we close out, I want to at least describe what I possibly can. Up top, there's another goddess that is being represented. That goddess name is Hathor. She's the cow goddess. Here's another animal. And the average person that might look at that, they might say, well, that's just a bird. But really, that's a hawk or a falcon representing Horus or Heru or the hawk god or the falcon god. Alright? King Narmer or King Menes, M-E-N-E-S, is also known as the Horus god. He's also known as the Horus ruler. He's also known as the Horus king. Alright? So that's where this comes from. Okay? So you got Hathor, you got Horus or Heru, you got him wearing the Upper Egypt crown, you got the features that look like he's from African descent, you got another feature from African descent. This particular person in the background, if you notice, he's holding King Narmer's sandals. If you notice, King Narmer right now is barefooted. The reason why he's barefooted, because this was representation of him walking on holy ground. Now, if you notice in the Bible, it talks about a lot of people and a lot of prophets walking on holy ground. This is where they got this concept from. Alright? And there's his servant in the back, or his armor bearer, holding his sandals while he's conquering his enemies in the name of Horus and in the name of Hathor. Are y'all following what I'm saying? Okay. Okay. We still got some. All right. This is a piece of pottery that the archaeologist or Egyptologist Corbell found that we talked about earlier. This piece of pottery has what they believe the Scorpion King on it. Alright? The Scorpion King ruleship or time of rule, I want to say from doing my research, roughly around 5,000 to 4,000. I even want to say from 5,000 to 3,000 BC or BCE. Alright? One of the reasons why they called him the Scorpion King, if you notice, there is a scorpion by his face. Alright? Right here. Also notice the crown that he's wearing. Alright? In his hand he has some type of architectural tool. I don't know if he was doing some planning or something of that nature. But there was a goddess at that time named Serket. And she was a scorpion goddess. She was known to protect people from scorpions or North African scorpions from, biting them. Protect them from their poison. Alright? The crown that he's wearing is a crown of Upper Egypt. When you look at different kings and they're wearing some type of headdress, all of their headdress meant something. This particular crown that protrudes up, and you see that, it's kind of similar to what the Pope wears today. That is a representation of him ruling Upper Egypt. Alright? Anytime you see that scorpion, 9 times out of 10, it represents the goddess Serket. So since we can date this king back to around 5,000 BC, we can also date the goddess back to 5,000 BC. This time was before the Bible, it was before the Quran, or any type of literature, I want to say main literature, was created about any god. Alright? They had a lot of deities back then. Serket was one of them. She also survived thousands of years after this. So this is not just a goddess that he believed in, but it was a goddess that many believed in. Also, I want you to notice his African features. Notice his lips. Notice his ears. I want you to notice his nose. Alright? Notice the person in the background, his head in a sort of afro. His nose still protruding. Alright? When you see artifacts like that, pay attention to the details. Pay attention to the features of the faces. And it'll tell on itself. Okay? This is a goddess. This is actually a picture taken from an artifact in Egypt. Can anybody tell me what she has on top of her head? A scorpion. When you see a woman with a scorpion on top of her head, it is the goddess Serket. Alright? So this is one picture of Serket. This is a North African scorpion. This is probably the scorpion that Serket took after, or was known for. The scorpion on top of her head. Alright? Scorpions were very popular. And if you notice, the Egyptian gods and Egyptian goddesses, they always took on some type of form concerning nature. Whether it be an animal, whether it be the stars, whether it be the moon. There's always something to do with nature that they would relate the supernatural to for some reason. I don't know what their fascination was about agriculture. I don't know what their fascination was about nature. But evidently they thought it was something divine about nature. or they wouldn't name their goddess and gods after things of This is another popular pose of the goddess Serket. As you notice, it's gold. It also has a scorpion on top of her head once again. Later on in Egyptian history, she began to take on the identity of the goddess Isis or Aset, and she became a form of Aset. But before, she stood her own ground and she had her own identity back in the pre-dynastic time as just the goddess Serket. This pose right here is important because Serket, not only was she known to protect the Egyptians from bites and poisonous, scorpion bites and poisonous snakes and things of that nature, but she also protected the canopic jars. Canopic jars were 4 jars that body parts were placed in during someone's burial in Egypt. That was a ritual, that was a routine that they did. They would put the lungs in one jar, the heart in another jar, and etc., etc. And she was known to protect the tomb or the canopic jars of the individual. So this was a pose, and if you notice her arms stretched out, she's protecting the canopic jars.